In a galaxy where peace had reigned for centuries, the Galactic Alliance had long forgotten the brutal reality of war. It was an era of cooperation and harmony, where conflicts were resolved through diplomacy, not violence. The different species of the galaxy, each with their own quirks, strengths, and weaknesses, had developed a structured society that flourished in its collective calm. Military engagements were so rare that many considered them a relic of a bygone age. To these species, the idea of war was terrifying, something to be avoided at all costs. But when the Krylath appeared, the Alliance found itself facing a threat unlike any in living memory. The Krylath were a nomadic race of conquerors, masters of warfare, whose sole purpose seemed to be destruction and domination. Entire star systems had fallen in their wake, and the devastation they left behind was unfathomable to the peaceful societies of the Alliance. Planets were razed, civilizations wiped out, and defenses rendered meaningless against their overwhelming firepower and ruthless tactics. Panic spread through the Alliance Council as reports of the Krylatha's approach reached their ears. The once peaceful and confident leaders now faced the reality of annihilation. In a desperate move, they sent out calls for aid across the galaxy. Every member species was asked to send forces to help defend their home systems. Most responded, though none were prepared for the magnitude of the conflict ahead. One species, however, was relatively new to the Alliance, the humans. Referred to as Deathworlders, because their home planet, Earth, was classified as one of the most dangerous and unpredictable worlds in the galaxy, humans were still largely a mystery to the other species. Their induction into the Alliance had been met with both curiosity and caution. Humans had only recently begun exploring the stars, and their rapid adaptation to interstellar life was seen as both impressive and unnerving. When humanity volunteered its forces to the front lines of the Krylath invasion, the Council was hesitant but desperate enough to accept. Humans were sent to one of the most volatile battlefronts, where defeat was almost certain. It was seen as a sacrificial move, one that might buy the other species time to regroup. There were no high expectations for the humans. In fact, many thought they would crumble under the pressure of an enemy as fierce as the Krylath. As the human fleet arrived, the alien commanders stationed at the front were baffled by the humans' demeanor. Unlike the other species, who were frantic in their preparations, the humans moved with a sense of calm that bordered on arrogance. Captain Sarah Graves, the human commander, stepped off her ship with an easy smile, her eyes scanning the battlefield as if she were evaluating a minor skirmish, not the site of a galactic invasion. The alien commanders were visibly distressed. They rushed to brief Graves on the gravity of the situation, describing the Krylatha's unparalleled strength, their history of conquering entire civilizations, and their advanced weaponry that could obliterate planetary defenses. Every word was laced with fear. The Krylath were a terror that no one had ever survived. Captain Graves listened patiently, nodding along, but her reaction was anything but what the aliens had expected. She smiled, almost amused, and said with a casual shrug, "Sounds like light training." The alien commanders were stunned. Light training? They had just described the most feared and deadly species in the galaxy, and this human commander was treating it like a simple drill. One commander, a towering amphibious species whose species thrived in bureaucratic environments, but had little experience with war, sputtered. "You do realize the Krylath have never been defeated, don't you?" Graves simply nodded. "Oh, I know. Should be fun." The disbelief was palpable. The aliens were horrified, not just by the situation they faced but by the fact that the humans, who they had thought would understand the direness of the situation, seemed to be taking it all in stride. Another commander, a four-eyed insected species known for their caution and careful planning, tried once more to get through to Graves. "This is no joke. We are outmatched. The Krylath will destroy everything in their path." Captain Graves raised an eyebrow. "I'm aware. But trust me, we've seen worse." This only deepened the alien commander's anxiety. What could possibly be worse than the Krylath? They had heard stories of Earth, of its violent storms, its wild and untamable creatures, and the unpredictable nature of its environment. But none of that compared to the technological terror that was the Krylath Armada. To the alien commanders, this was an existential crisis. But to Captain Graves and her human forces, this was just another day. As the human soldiers set up their equipment and prepared for battle, their attitude remained casual. They joked, they laughed, and they made light of the impending doom. The alien soldiers, watching from a distance, were unnerved by the humans' lack of fear. How could they be so calm when the Krylath were on their way? One alien soldier muttered to his companion, "They're going to get themselves killed. They don't understand what's coming." But the humans understood perfectly. They just didn't see the Krylath as the threat the aliens did. They had lived through the unpredictable chaos of Earth, where survival wasn't guaranteed and every day was a new challenge. To them, the Krylath were just another obstacle, another test of their resilience. As the final preparations were made and the Krylath fleet loomed on the horizon, Captain Graves stood at the ready, her troops lined up behind her. She glanced at the alien commanders, all of whom were pale with fear, and said, "Relax. We've got this." And for the first time, the alien commanders wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans knew something they didn't. As the humans settled into their positions, the alien commanders watched in disbelief. They had seen preparations for war before, but never like this. The humans moved with an eerie efficiency, as if this was routine for them. The alien species, on the other hand, were frantic, adjusting their equipment, issuing last-minute orders, and double-checking their defense systems. Fear was palpable among the alien ranks, while the humans seemed almost indifferent to the chaos around them. The Krylath invasion force was fast approaching. Their ships, massive and heavily armed, were an ominous sight, blotting out stars as they descended upon the planet. Every alien soldier knew the stories, their unbroken string of victories, the way they dismantled planetary defenses without effort, the sheer brutality of their methods. The Krylath were more than just conquerors. They were destroyers, and no one had ever stood a chance against them. But here were the humans, acting like they were on a casual drill. As the Krylath fleet came into view, Captain Graves was giving orders in a calm, almost bored tone. She told her troops to hold steady and stick to the plan, as if this battle was just another day at the office. Her demeanor unnerved the alien commanders. One of them, a general from a species known for their calculated precision in battle, approached Graves, visibly shaken. "You don't understand," the general stammered, his voice barely holding together. "The Krylath, they'll tear through us like we're nothing. They've done it to everyone else." Graves looked at him, her expression unchanged. "We're not everyone else." The alien general opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He had never encountered anything like this before. The humans weren't arrogant, but their calmness was something beyond his comprehension. It was almost as if they thrived on the idea of facing the impossible. He glanced over at the human soldiers, who were chatting amongst themselves, double-checking their weapons, and even cracking jokes. It was surreal. The Krylath ships entered the atmosphere, their engines roaring like thunder. The ground trembled as they neared, and the tension among the alien forces reached its peak. Several species had already started to retreat, believing that facing the Krylath head-on was a death sentence. But the humans didn't move. They stayed exactly where they were, waiting. When the Krylath finally made contact, their initial assault was brutal. Explosions rocked the battlefield, and the alien forces scattered in all directions, their formations breaking instantly. The Krylath were relentless. Their technology advanced beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Plasma cannons fired, vaporizing anything in their path, and their infantry swarmed the ground with deadly precision. But the humans didn't flinch. Captain Graves barked a few quick commands, and her forces responded immediately. They moved with precision, executing well-practiced maneuvers that seemed second nature to them. Instead of falling back, the humans advanced, meeting the Krylath head-on in a way that no species had dared to before. The alien commanders watched in shock as the humans engaged the Krylath forces without hesitation. Their tactics were unconventional, unpredictable. They didn't follow the rigid, hierarchical strategies that other species relied on. Instead, they adapted on the fly, using guerrilla tactics, surprise ambushes, and sheer tenacity to throw the Krylath off balance. Where other species would have panicked, the humans seemed to come alive. They thrived in the chaos, turning what should have been a massacre into a series of small victories. The Krylath, for all their advanced weaponry and overwhelming numbers, were struggling to keep up with the humans' relentless assault. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the humans changed the game, hitting them from unexpected angles and exploiting every weakness. The alien commanders, watching from a distance, were dumbfounded. The humans were pushing the Krylath back, something no species had ever managed to do. How was this possible? The Krylath had never faced anything like this. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with superior technology and brute force, but the humans weren't playing by those rules. They were using tactics that the Krylath had no answer for. The battlefield was a chaotic mess, with explosions and gunfire echoing across the plains. Alien species that had been on the verge of retreat began to rally, emboldened by the human success. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans were turning the tide. In the midst of the battle, Captain Graves continued to issue orders with an unshakable calm. To her, this wasn't a crisis. It was exactly what she had expected. The Krylath were tough, sure, but Earth had prepared her and her troops for worse. Back home, survival was never guaranteed. Earth was a planet of constant danger, where the environment, the wildlife, and even other humans were often the biggest threats. Compared to the daily grind of surviving on a death world, this was manageable. As the battle raged on, the alien forces began to coordinate with the humans, adopting some of their tactics and following their lead. It was as if they had suddenly realized that there was a way to fight back, a way to survive. But even as they joined in, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something unique to humanity. The Krylath, for the first time in their history, were struggling. Their usual tactics weren't working. Their overwhelming firepower wasn't enough. They had never encountered a species that fought like this, a species that seemed to treat war as a challenge, not a death sentence. The Krylath commanders, watching from their command ships, were growing desperate. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. And yet, there was no denying the truth. The humans were winning. As the battle continued, the alien commanders began to realize that they had severely underestimated the humans. They had thought of them as a wild card, a species with potential but not much else. But now, as they watched the Krylath falter, they understood that the humans were something entirely different. They were survivors in the truest sense of the word, forged in the crucible of their dangerous homeworld. What the Krylath saw as war, the humans saw as an opportunity to adapt, to overcome. Where other species saw defeat, the humans saw a challenge. And that was why they were winning. By the end of the first day of fighting, the Krylath were in full retreat, unable to keep up with the relentless assault of the humans. The alien commanders, who had expected to be wiped out, were left standing in awe, their belief in the inevitable Krylath victory shattered. And the humans? They were already preparing for the next wave, unfazed and ready for more. To them, this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The Krylath were relentless, regrouping for a second wave. Their commanders had underestimated the humans, but now, with their pride on the line, they poured even more resources into the fight. Reinforcements arrived, heavier warships descended, and ground forces doubled in number. It was clear that the Krylath were prepared to escalate, ready to crush this unexpected resistance once and for all. For the alien species who had already resigned themselves to defeat, this renewed Krylath assault was terrifying. Surely, no one could withstand what was coming next. But the humans remained unshaken. As the Krylath unleashed their second wave, Captain Graves continued to direct her forces with the same calm authority she had shown from the beginning. Her troops moved with precision, responding instantly to her commands. They had expected the Krylath to come back harder. In fact, they had counted on it. The Krylath shifted their strategy. They began to bombard key positions with overwhelming firepower, hoping to break through the human lines and scatter their forces. Their infantry units, genetically enhanced for combat, charged across the battlefield with a savagery that had broken countless armies before. The ground shook under their assault, but the humans held fast. The alien commanders, who had retreated to safer positions, watched in disbelief as the humans absorbed the Krylatha's full power without breaking. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't falter. If anything, they seemed to grow more determined, more focused, as the battle intensified. Where other species would have been overwhelmed, the humans adapted. They used the Krylatha's aggression against them, drawing them into traps and ambushes that turned the tide of each engagement. They moved their forces with such fluidity that it seemed as though they had planned for every eventuality. The Krylath, who relied on brute force and intimidation to dominate their enemies, were ill-prepared for this kind of response. The human infantry, smaller in number but far more mobile, used guerrilla tactics that bewildered the Krylath forces. Instead of meeting them head-on, the humans struck from unexpected angles, using the terrain to their advantage. They launched surprise attacks, disappearing into cover before the Krylath could retaliate. It was a form of warfare that the Krylath hadn't encountered before, chaotic, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective. The Krylath commanders, watching the battle from their command ships, struggled to comprehend what was happening. This wasn't supposed to be possible. No species had ever been able to stand against their full military might, let alone fight back with such ferocity. Yet, here were the humans, not just surviving but pushing them back. At one point, the Krylath unleashed a devastating orbital bombardment, targeting the human command center in a desperate attempt to cripple their leadership. The blast was massive, leaving a smoldering crater where the command center had stood. The alien commanders, watching from a distance, were certain that the humans were finished. Surely, no one could have survived such an attack. But as the smoke cleared, Captain Graves emerged, unharmed and unfazed. Her command center had been a decoy. The real command post had been moved hours before the bombardment, in anticipation of the Krylatha's tactics. Graves continued to issue orders, her voice steady and clear, as if nothing had happened. The alien commanders, who had been watching in horror, were left speechless. The humans had anticipated the Krylatha's moves before they even made them. The Krylatha's frustration began to show. Their forces, used to overwhelming victories, were now bogged down in a fight they couldn't control. Every time they attempted to break through, the humans countered with a new strategy. Their soldiers, once confident in their superiority, were now wary, hesitating before each advance. The Krylath, for the first time, were losing ground. Even as the Krylath forces faltered, the humans showed no signs of slowing down. They continued their assault with relentless energy, pushing the Krylath back with a combination of tactical brilliance and sheer tenacity. To the humans, this was just another challenge to overcome, another battle in a long history of survival. Their ability to adapt, to change their tactics on the fly, gave them an edge that the Krylath couldn't match. As the battle raged on, the alien species who had once viewed the humans as reckless newcomers began to realize the truth. This wasn't luck or blind arrogance. The humans were a force of nature. Their calm demeanor in the face of overwhelming odds wasn't an act of bravado. It was the product of centuries of survival on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. To the humans, this was just another test, another opportunity to prove themselves. The Krylath, on the other hand, were beginning to crack under the pressure. Their commanders issued increasingly desperate orders, throwing more and more resources into the battle in a futile attempt to regain control. But it was too late. The humans had seized the initiative, and the Krylath were now reacting to their moves, rather than the other way around. What had started as a one-sided invasion had turned into a full-scale retreat for the Krylath. Their forces, once seen as unstoppable, were being systematically dismantled by the humans. The Krylath ships that had once dominated the skies were now fleeing, trying to escape the relentless human assault. On the ground, their infantry were being routed, overwhelmed by the humans' superior tactics and unyielding resolve. By the end of the day, the Krylath had lost control of the battlefield. What remained of their forces retreated, abandoning their foothold and leaving the system behind. It was a defeat that no one in the galaxy could have predicted. The Krylath had been invincible, undefeated in every engagement they had fought, until now. The alien commanders, who had witnessed the battle from afar, were left in stunned silence. They had expected the humans to be wiped out, to crumble under the weight of the Krylatha's assault. But instead, they had watched as the humans turned the tide of the battle, defeating the most feared enemy in the galaxy with a combination of ingenuity, bravery, and pure stubbornness. For the first time, the alien species of the Galactic Alliance began to see the humans for what they truly were. They weren't just newcomers to the stars. They were survivors, forged in the crucible of their Deathworld home. And if they could stand against the Krylath, then perhaps there was no force in the galaxy that could truly break them. As the human forces regrouped and began preparing for the next phase of the campaign, Captain Graves stood at the front lines, watching the remnants of the Krylath fleet disappear into the distance. She hadn't been surprised by the outcome. After all, this was just light training. With the Krylath forces in full retreat, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The remnants of the once mighty invasion fleet were disappearing into the blackness of space, their weapons silenced, their morale shattered. For the first time in their history, they had encountered a force they couldn't subdue. The alien commanders who had expected complete devastation were left standing amidst the wreckage, trying to process the impossible reality before them. Captain Graves, with her usual unflappable calm, began issuing orders for cleanup and securing the area. To her, the battle was over, but the work was far from finished. Her soldiers, still focused and energized, began systematically sweeping the field for any stragglers or hidden threats. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph. For the humans, this was merely the end of one challenge and the beginning of preparations for the next. The alien commanders, still shaken by the events they had witnessed, gathered near Graves. One of them, a nervous reptilian being whose species valued strategy over brute force, approached her cautiously. How did you do this?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Krylath have never been beaten. No one has ever survived their full-scale invasions." Graves shrugged lightly, not in a dismissive way, but as if the answer was so obvious it didn't require deep thought. "On Earth," she began, "we deal with far worse every day. The planet throws everything it has at us, storms, earthquakes, tsunamis, you name it. And if that wasn't enough, we've spent centuries fighting each other, sometimes over things that don't even matter." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. "Compared to that, this invasion? It's just light training." The alien commanders stared at her, unsure whether to be stunned or impressed. To them, war was something to be avoided at all costs, an absolute last resort. The idea of facing a force as deadly as the Krylath without terror gripping their hearts was unthinkable. But here was this human commander, speaking of planetary invasions as if they were nothing more than a warm-up exercise. Another commander, one from a species known for its complex bureaucracies and careful risk assessments, spoke up. "You mean to tell us that Earth is more dangerous than this? Than the Krylath?" There was skepticism in his voice, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Graves smiled slightly. "Earth is unpredictable. Every day is a fight for survival, whether it's against nature or each other. The Krylath are dangerous, sure, but they're predictable. They rely on their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Once you figure that out, they're not as scary as everyone thinks." The alien commanders exchanged glances, each trying to reconcile what they had just heard. The Krylath, predictable? It was a notion that none of them had ever considered. But looking back at the battlefield, at the humans who had fought and won against impossible odds, they began to understand. The humans didn't see the Krylath as an unbeatable force. They saw them as just another challenge, one to be solved and overcome, like everything else they had faced on their dangerous homeworld. One commander, an insect whose species prized discipline and order, asked the question that had been on everyone's mind since the beginning. "But how did you know? How did you know you could win?" Graves' expression softened slightly, though her tone remained confident. "We didn't. Not at first. But humans are good at adapting. We figure things out as we go, and we're not afraid to take risks when we have to. The Krylath are strong, but they're not invincible. We found their weak spots and exploited them, just like we would with any other enemy. There was a long pause as the alien commanders digested this. For their species, war had always been a matter of careful calculation, of knowing the outcome before committing to action. The idea of going into a battle without certainty, relying on adaptability and improvisation, was alien to them in every sense of the word. Yet, it was precisely that unpredictability that had allowed the humans to win. The battle was over, but its impact on the Galactic Alliance was just beginning. Word of the humans' victory would spread quickly, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Species that had once looked down on humanity, as inexperienced newcomers, would have to rethink their assumptions. The humans, the Deathworlders, had proven themselves in a way that no one could ignore. As Graves prepared to leave, one of the commanders stopped her. "What will you do now?" he asked, his tone respectful, almost reverent. Graves looked out at the horizon, where the remnants of the Krya fleet had vanished into the distance. "We'll be ready for the next one," she said simply. "There's always a next one." And with that, she walked away, leaving the alien commanders to reflect on what they had just witnessed. The humans had not only survived, they had thrived in a situation that should have broken them. Their resilience, their ability to adapt, and their refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds had set them apart from every other species in the galaxy. For the first time, the alien commanders began to see the humans not just as allies, but as something more. They were a species that could face the worst the galaxy had to offer and come out stronger on the other side. And if the Krya couldn't defeat them, then perhaps nothing could. The Krya themselves, licking their wounds from this unprecedented loss, would not forget what had happened here. They would regroup, reassess, and undoubtedly try again. But they now understood what the Galactic Alliance had only just begun to realize. Humanity was not a species to be taken lightly. The battle had revealed more than just the human strength. It had shown the galaxy that there was something unique about them, something that went beyond their technology or their numbers. It was their spirit, their drive to survive and thrive in the face of adversity, that set them apart. While other species might crumble under the weight of such challenges, the humans seemed to rise to the occasion. As the alien commanders dispersed, each returning to their respective species with tales of the battle, they knew that the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The Deathworlders had proven themselves in the most definitive way possible, and now, they had earned their place among the stars as a force to be reckoned with. And for the humans? This was just another day,